Hey guys, welcome to Tech Vitals. Today we are going to learn about list in Python. So list is a collection or the combination of different values. So when we use a variable, so let's say when we use name equals Paul, so here the name is storing just one value, that is Paul. It cannot store multiple values, but using the list we can store more than one values, and they can also be of different data types. So list can store strings, integers, floats, or any other values at the same place. And if you are coming from some other programming language like Java, C, or C++, or some other programming language, then you might be familiar with array. So list is the same thing as the array. So in Python, we don't call it array, but we call it list. So let's see the example of list. So let's create a list of names, and we use these square brackets to create list. So let's say Paul, let's say James, and let's say Anthony. So here this names is the list, and this list has three values: Paul, James, and Anthony. And just like the string values, this list values also work based on their index position. So the list value also starts from 0 index. So this Paul is at the 0 index position, this James has the 1 index position, and this Anthony has the 2 index position. So names 0 will be Paul, names 1 will be James, and names 3 will be Anthony. And we can also locate them with the reverse index position. So names -1 will be Anthony, names -2 will be James, and names -3 will be Paul. So let's comment this out, and to check if these are really the case, let's try to print names 0. So it should print Paul. So let's see. Okay, so this names 0 printed Paul, and if we try to print names 3, then it must print Anthony. Let's see. Yes. Oh, I accidentally put 3 in here, but it should have been 2, because 0, 1, and 2, we don't have the third index value, so it should be 2. I'm really sorry for that. Okay, now let's try to run it again. And as you can see, names 2 has the value of this Anthony. And now let's also try this reverse index position. So -3, it should work, and it should print Paul. So let's try to run this. Okay, Paul, and -1 should print Anthony. Okay, now we can also use the slicing in this list as well, just like we did in the string. So if we type 0:2, so it will get the list values from the index position 0, and then it goes up to 2, but it won't include the 2 index position value. So 0, 1, 2, it will not include this Anthony, it will just include Paul and James. So if we try to print it, it printed Paul and James because it didn't include this 2 index position value. But if we give 3, so we are slicing through the 0 index to 3 index, and now it will include the value from 0 index to 2 index value. So now it should print all of the values, Paul, James, and Anthony. And we can just give the empty values in the both left and right side. So this will also print all of the values, so Paul, James, and Anthony. and if we give one more colon and give -1, then it should print the values in the reverse order. So we have Paul, James, and Anthony, but this should print Anthony, James, and Paul. So let's see. Okay, so it printed Anthony, James, and Paul, so it just reversed the list items. Now if you want to print the index value or the index position of any of these list items, then you can just do names.index, and then you can put the value for which you want to know the index value of. So let's type James. So this names.index and James should return the index value of this James. So we know that the index value of this James is 1 because 0, 1. So James has the value of index 1. So it should print 1. And as you can see, it printed 1. And for Anthony, it should print 2. So let's run this, and it printed 2. So that's the way of identifying the index value of the list items. Okay. Now we can also modify the list items. So the first item of this names list is Paul. So this names 0 has the value Paul, but we can change this value. So we can just write names and then 0 because that's the first item that we want to change. And let's give the new values. So let's give Brian, and now if we try to print the names, now it's printing Brian as the first list item because here we just modified the first item of the names list. We can do this for all the values. So let's change the second item. So let's give Lisa, and let's also change the third item. That is let's give John. Now the original items of this names list were Paul, James, and Anthony, but here we are changing them into Brian, Lisa, and John. And what we can do is let's also print the original list items. And what we can do is, let's say after changing the list items, then we will print the new list. So let's run this. Okay, so at the beginning the value of list was Paul, James, and Anthony, and after changing the list items we got new list items, that is Brian, Lisa, and John. Okay, so now let's remove this, and we can also get rid of these comments. Okay, so the few moments back we used this print names and this slicing to reverse the list items, but it will just print them in the reverse order. It will not actually reverse the list. So if we try to print names again, and let's run this, so as you can see, at the first print it is printing them in the reverse order, but when we try to print the names again, it's just printing in the original order. So if you want to actually reverse the list, then we can do names.reverse. So now if we print names, now as you can see, the list has actually reversed. So we can use this reverse method to reverse the list items. And let's say we want to add more items in this list, so we can use this append method. So let's try to add one more name. So let's add Billy, and now if we print the names, then it added this Billy at the end of the list. We can also use the insert method, so names.insert, and it takes two arguments. The first argument is the index value, so we have 0, 1, and 2, So let's add the new item in the third index, so 3, and then we can give any name. So let's give Emma, and let's print it again. So here it just added this Emma in the third index, but if we add this in second index, now it's gonna replace this Anthony with Emma, and it will shift this Anthony to the next index. So if we run this, as you can see, before this Anthony was in the second index, but now since we insert this Emma in the second index, now Emma is in the second index and this Anthony is now in the third index. So using insert, we can also define in which index position we want to add the new item. Okay, we can also remove the list items. So we can do names.remove. Let's remove James, and if we print names, now since we removed James from this list, now we only got Paul and Anthony, so that's remove. We can also do clear method. This clear method will remove all the items from the list. So if we print names, then there is no items because we just cleared the list. Now we can also use names.pop method, and this pop method will remove the list item from the backward. So it will always remove the last item from the list. So if we do names.pop, then it will remove Anthony. Now let's print names. So we got Paul and James. And if we do names.pop again and print the names, so in this first pop method it removed the Anthony, and in this second pop method it will remove James because now James is the last item. So if we run this, we will just get Paul. And if we run this pop method again and print the names, let's try to run this. Okay, so as you can see, at first it removed Anthony, at second it removed James, and at the third pop it removed Paul. So we got empty list because it just removed all the items. So that's pop method. We can also use count method to count the list items. So if we count Paul and we have to print this, so it returned 1 because we have just one Paul in these names. But let's add 2 more Paul. Now we have 3 Paul in this names list. So now if we run this names.count for Paul, it will return 3. So that's the count method. Okay, so let's see one more method of list. So we can use names.sort method, and what it does, it simply sorts the list items in the proper alphabetical order. So here we can see the list items are not in the alphabetical order, but when we use the sort function, and now if we print the names and try to run this, now it's printing Anthony at the beginning, then James, and then there's 3 Paul. So now it's in the alphabetical order. And we can do the same thing for the integers as well. So let's remove these string items and let's give some integer items. So let's say 5, 6, 1, 3, 8, 9. So these integers are not in the proper order, but when we use this sort method, and we might also want to change this variable name, so let's give number instead of names. So now if we try to run this, it has just sorted the numbers. So we have 1, 3, 5, 6, 8, 9, and the list can have the combination of all the data types. So we can include the string value Paul, James. We can also include the float value, so let's say 3.4, 2.3, or we can also have this boolean value, so false, true, and we can still print this list and it will still run because the list can be the collection of any kind of data types. And we can also loop through these list items. So let's create a new list. So let's say items equals, let's give Paul, let's give 25, let's give 30.45, and let's give true. So here we have string, integer, float, and boolean value. And now we are going to loop through this list items. So what we can do is for item in items, and we can just print item. So when we use this loop, it's going to print this Paul first, and then it will print 25, then 30.45, and then true. So let's run this, and as you can see, it printed Paul, 25, 30.45, and true. We can also use those list methods that we just saw inside the loop as well. So let's say if item equals true, then let's remove these items. So items dot remove, and then let's remove this item. Okay, so now after removing this item, let's print it. So let's run this. Now as you can see here, we don't have this true value because inside this for loop we just remove this true, or we can simply replace that item. So if item equals true, then we can do items, and then let's grab the index value of this item. So items dot index item equals, let's say, false. And now let's try to run this, and here we just replaced that true with the false value. So that's how we can loop through the list items. Okay, so in this lesson we learned about list and different methods and functions that we can use with the list, and I hope you enjoyed this lesson. And that's gonna do it for this video. I'll see you soon with the next video. Till then, keep learning. Goodbye.